Great. Thanks so much for coming out and making the trip west. It's great to have you here. I want to begin a little bit just with your story and how you came to focus on knowledge worker productivity. I believe, from what you told me, you were reading Drucker's Post-Capitalist Society, his 1993 book, and actually my favorite of his. And you had something of an epiphany. Tell me what happened there. What did you see and what happened?
Well, Post-Capitalist Society came at a very good time for me. I had been in the corporate world for about 15 years. It was a beautiful sunny day in 1993 in Toronto, and there were so few beautiful sunny days, I remember it very well. But, I got the book, and I was reading the book, and I had sort of worked my way up in a corporate environment, had been involved with a lot of different projects, some of which resulted in things, and other big projects that really didn't result in anything at all.
This was at Coca-Cola?
It was in a variety of different companies within the Coca-Cola system.
Right.
At this point, I was at a turnaround for Coca-Cola Beverages, which was losing, it was a public company in Canada, it was losing $1 million a week. And we were at a point where we were seeing all sorts of knowledge work productivity dysfunctions. We just didn't really know that they were called something, you know. And we saw marketing people going in one direction, and churning out new products, and that was eating up cash. And the finance people were going in another direction, and they were slashing budgets and squeezing capital and trying to save as much capital dollars as they could. The manufacturing people were off trying to reduce their cost per case and generating a whole bunch of inventory in the process, and that was eating up cash. And we had then situations where the HR people were trying to keep, from a people side, cutting staff, but trying to keep the motivation up, you know. So it was a real cacophony of things that were going on. And in reading Post-Capitalist Society, the term knowledge work and knowledge worker productivity struck a chord, because it was very easy to see where knowledge workers could be productive in the micro analysis, and yet not make the organization productive overall at a macro level. And so it's really both the allocation of knowledge work in the same sense as Peter Drucker mentioned of allocating capital, allocating labor, allocating knowledge being a really key part of this, really came to me at a very good time to begin to think about what can we do differently in terms of linking strategy and operations, trying to get clear, remove a lot of moving parts, and try to take something that was very disintegrated and try to make it integrated for the turnaround itself. And it was really an epiphany, as you said at that point. I highlighted the book, I typed out different things and gave it to my coworkers. But then after that, the next 15 years, I think, was even more important, because it really gave me a lens and it gave me some terminology to begin thinking about things that had bothered me so much in working in big companies, to really begin to think about how we can do things better in big companies, but then also what can be learned in a small one.
Huh. So you began to pursue your doctorate at George Washington University and begin to sort of get some of the intellectual and academic sort of background to further this thinking. And then obviously at some point along the way you decided to do something that often isn't done, which is actually go out and test these theories in the real world, in a real firm, as I mentioned, Brand Velocity Inc., based in Atlanta. And you did this by designing your company, this was what, about 5 years ago? Is that right? With what you described as a clean sheet of paper. So really, you know, getting away from any organizational structure that may have been vestiges of the old manufacturing, old manual labor setup and the way you do things, and prototyping how to implement these knowledge worker productivity practices. describe how you looked at everything through this prism of knowledge worker productivity. What did this mean as you looked at this clean sheet of paper? What exactly were you trying to do when you set everything up? And then we'll get down to some of the specifics.
Sure. Well, that was a real epiphany. The time was, I left corporate America on my 43rd birthday. It was my official midlife crisis.
Most guys just get a sports car, you know. They don't like go out and do all this other stuff.
I couldn't afford one.
Okay.
And so I remember that part of it clearly. At that point, I was the chief information officer for the Coca-Cola Company. And I think in technology, particularly in global implementations, it's a great way to see the function and dysfunction of knowledge work, because you're changing business practices and dealing with personalities at the same time that you're working with the technology component on a global basis. But when we looked at Brand Velocity being a mechanism to design a company from a clean sheet of paper, it really started with some questions. And it was, how can you design a company that is scalable, that doesn't need any fixed assets, that does everything that a big company does, and minimizes the dysfunctions of a big company. And it was really that which started taking a look at how you can build something from scratch that begins to do all four of those things. And then not just think about it on a whiteboard, but really practice it with real customers, with real employees, see what's working and what doesn't work, and then try to mature it over a long period of time.
Wow. So let's get down to those specifics. So you do the company does about $5 million now a year in business. And it's an IT consulting firm, right? A technology consulting firm. Describe just very quickly what you do and who you compete with. Let's just start there.
Well, we oversee very large technology projects. Typically, they're $100 million and over. We take very senior people and we apply knowledge work productivity principles to these projects, because every day can be 100,000 a day, 200,000 a day, and so time really is money. And so we apply knowledge work productivity to speed up those projects and make them more successful. And then we really had to apply it internally as well, so that we were eating the dog food, and that we were learning how to do it ourselves in the same way that we were trying to accelerate it to external parties.
Right. And in spades. So you said, so no fixed assets was one of your goals. So, right, so you're a $5 million company now, 10 employees, right? And you have no real estate, you have no you have no big computer servers or any of that stuff. You told me today you lease a total of 64 square feet of permanent office space in Atlanta to put files in as a central file room. So where do you have meetings? Where do people work? How does that work?
Well, we're designed as a traditionally virtual company.
Traditionally virtual. I know traditional and I know virtual. Tell me where they meet. What does that mean?
When we designed the architecture for the company, and tried to do it in a way that would scale, what we saw, and this gets to a lot of the dysfunctions of the traditional model, that a traditional model wastes an awful lot. So when you drive through the city of LA or any other city at night, you see that there aren't a lot of people in the buildings. Or on the weekend, there aren't a lot of people. If you see specialized assets of any type, you'll notice that they aren't used a lot of time. So our view was that in the knowledge age, the traditional model was not sustainable, but also the virtual model wasn't scalable. And it really took a combination of a traditional model and a virtual model. So for instance, on assets, One big component of assets is office space. And in designing the company from scratch, we do need to look and act in a way that's traditional. Going back to the original objectives, we need to be able to do everything as a traditionally virtual company that we were able to do at a company like Coca-Cola, which has lots of assets.
So what do you do?
We have an agreement with a firm called Regus, and they have hundreds of offices around the world. We actually have more office space than the Coca-Cola company, plus General Electric, plus lots, because we can literally go in any major city and in multiple places in a major city and have an office at any time. At the same time, we do need a corporate address, and we do need to have physical mail handled, and we need to have those types of things. And so we have, in the Pinnacle building in Atlanta, Georgia, we have the 64 square feet for secured space, where we do handle sensitive documents, and there is a traditional component. You don't want all of your main corporate resources scattered throughout who knows where. But you want to have that there, and so physical mail goes to that address. That's our corporate address. We route our phone through one service, and from an asset perspective, we're connected anywhere, anytime. So our customer relationship management system, our accounting system, our intranet, our voicemail system, all of our systems are designed so that they can be accessed anywhere, anytime, and it doesn't matter where you are, anywhere in the world at any time to get access.
And a lot of that work is actually outsourced, right, to others, including like the office space is outsourced. So you can focus on the one piece, right?
Yeah, we focus completely on our service offerings with our customers. And we do link together intellectual property, our sales function, our relationship management, our delivery, HR, and business systems, but we do it in a way where they are designed to work together, and then they are generally, particularly in the 401k and payroll and all of that type, accounting services, legal services, all of that's done through a network of partners.
And why is being borderless, and why is setting up this way important for knowledge workers in particular, do you think?
Well, because increasingly the barriers of geography impede the ability to get stuff done. So when you look at where are the best minds in the world on a particular on a particular subject, they probably don't all want to live in the same place. They don't want to fight traffic all at the same time. And so what you really need to be able to do, particularly in a 7x24 environment, where literally it is important to leverage the curvature of the earth, you need to be able to address a problem with the right people at the right time with the right technology without having to be in the same place. Tomorrow morning is an example where there will be a conference call between Dusseldorf, Claremont, and St. Paul, and it will be transparent that people are in different places, because if you build your system to work that way, you become very efficient and effective, aka productive, in doing that. And the problem that most firms wrestle with is that they're not completely traditional, they're not completely virtual, and they try to be both. And so what happens is they add all the costs of being virtual on top of all the costs of being traditional, and then you start getting into the dysfunctions that occur in companies like how many windows do you have in your office, and I don't want this kind of PC, I want another PC, and a whole host of dysfunctions, which was really the fourth item in trying to remove the dysfunctions from a traditionally virtual environment.
Let's talk about your compensation model, which I think is amazing. In your book, you write, if you have an enterprise where someone isn't allowed to earn more than their boss, your company probably isn't as productive as it is capable of being. So what have you done here with the way you pay folks?
Well, one of the key things that we have done is to decouple compensation from rank and connect it to contribution. And so what happens with knowledge work is that different people contribute different amounts in different years. So if you look at the traditional hierarchy, which is very stacked towards compensating at the top, and it works, merit increases and everything else work to give more to those who
because it's a percentage of a bigger,
exactly,
of a bigger base.
And so the problem with that is you get into this king of the hill mentality, and that is you spend your time working up the hierarchy to get the perks that are associated with rank, and then you block the other people who are coming because you get to a place where either you don't want to mess up until you retire, or you become part of you know, the Walking Dead, you know, in terms of people who just are not engaged anymore. And what really needs to happen, particularly in knowledge work, where the difference between an average knowledge worker and a great knowledge worker can be hundreds of times more productivity. Programmers would be an example, where a genius programmer will be 10,000 times more productive than an average one. They both have programmer on their business card. And so you need, and a hierarchy will not accommodate that. And in the old days, when knowledge work wasn't as developed as it is today, and manual work was clear, the bands were narrow because there wasn't a huge difference between what one worker could do versus another. There were differences,
right,
but not 10,000 times difference. Right. And so the way the structure works today with the traditional model is you get bands. And so there is no huge incentive to be a lot more productive than your peer because you're basically within a very narrow band going to be compensated the same. We break that apart and we simplify, in our case, the incentive structure to be the three things that drive our business, and to have only an enterprise incentive architecture, where for us, if we can sell great work, if we can deliver great work, and we can recruit and develop great people who can do the same, then we're going to have a successful company.
So those are the yardsticks.
Those are the yardsticks.
And then how does this work? You have a point system, right, that allows, there's a base salary, and then you have a point system that allows anyone within the organization who, by these points, right, are deemed to have made the greatest contribution in those areas, get the bigger slice of the pie, right?
Right. We have, in our environment, we call it an economic pass-through, but basically we have a fixed amount that the corporation will take in terms of a percentage of revenues, and everything else gets transferred out to employees. And the way you transfer it out is based on contribution and based on the points that you're talking about. So when you sell an engagement, that will result in a certain amount of points, all related to revenue dollars, similar to delivery, similar to recruiting. And so it keeps accountability in the short term based on the work that you're doing, but also keeps track of it at the end so that you know how to redistribute the surplus profits.
And so do you have people who are lower down, who are not full partners, who are lower down on the org chart making more than the CEO?
Yes. Yeah, and it's really very, very beneficial for a lot of reasons. One is that with the King of the Hill structure, what you did last year really sets the stage for what you're going to earn this year. And what you find and what we have found in practice is that people don't contribute the same every year. And so you want a situation where somebody is incented to contribute as much as they possibly can all the time. And if they're not, that the incentive structure is transparent so that they know what they have to do to earn more. Similarly, if they're just having a bad year, they don't get compensated as if they're having a good one. And so you have the potential to make a lot more. You also have the potential to make a lot less, but then that's really the fairest way of contributing and to having a more productive company.
And have you ever had any beefs where, you know, somebody higher up was upset because somebody lower down was making more? Has it ever been an issue?
It hasn't, because it's transparent. You know, and I think when you look at compensation structures in traditional companies, it's the cloak of secrecy, you know, that makes it very difficult to navigate. You know, why is so-and-so earning more than I am? And if they find out. The fact that it's transparent and the fact that it's very clear how you can earn more and how you might earn less means that it's not the company's fault for dictating your compensation. It's really you who are dictating your compensation, and the company is simply a pass-through to whatever you earned.
Right. I also like this notion you have where some of the points that you get, right, that managers get are redistributed. Can you talk about that? And that's an effort to foster teamwork, right? Yeah,
it's, as an example, if you look at selling an engagement, the whole sales side has, if you are selling...
Bringing in new business, right?
Bring in new business.
Yeah.
If you sold a $100 engagement, that would be 100 points. 40 points would be for sales. 25 of those points would be for the lead. The person then has to redistribute 15 points to those who help them the most. And so what it does is it makes the Lone Rangers in the world want to reach out to other people, which helps train other people because they know they're going to have to give away the points anyway. Similarly, it makes everybody want to help because they know they're going to be recognized. The same thing happens on the delivery side as well, but the forced redistribution is a really important part and really follows its way through a lot of the design of the company.
That's amazing. You've also reinvented how you buy materials, tools, computers and copy machines and paper and cell phones and all of it. Can you describe, you know, this system and as you put it, to redesign your corporate and personal infrastructure? What's that mean? What do you do?
Well, this is an area where it's really driven more than anything else from trying to remove the dysfunctions of the way large companies work. And so an example would be in a large company, according to Gartner, the average cost per PC per person is, for a 4-year commitment, $28,000. Now, you or I, with no critical mass, could go out and buy a very good one, for $1,500. So how do you turn a $1,500 into a $28,000 investment? It's really through the dysfunction of standardizing things that are very difficult to standardize.
So you're taking a personal computer, if you're a big corporation, and trying to standardize it and loading it up with all this stuff.
As if it were a mainframe.
Right.
And so you get to the point, are people happy with the $28,000 computer they have? And the answer is no. You know, some want a Mac, some want a PC, some want a bigger one, some don't want any at all. And so the problem is that there is a huge, if you look at infrastructure in a new way, there is a real difference between corporate infrastructure, because this gets confused too, because corporate infrastructure with enterprise systems, which cost hundreds of millions of dollars, people think that they're their systems. And so one function head will derail a project, and that function head may not even be in that job by the time the system goes live. So it's really important to get very, very standardized on your corporate infrastructure.
Things like?
Things like your customer relationship management system, the way you do your financials, the way you do
HR, all of it.
Your HR system, so the way you do 401k, you do payroll, and all that.
Okay.
You should, basically, you're a dictator with those.
Okay.
You can listen to what people have to say, but they don't have a right to change them. Personal infrastructure is quite different, and so the way we handle that is we advance people money at the beginning of every quarter. They
How much do you give them?
We give them $6,000 per quarter at the beginning of every quarter. They use that money for business expenses. And then what this does is a couple of things. One is we have 4 expense reports per year. So we reduce the number of expense reports by 90%. And everybody believes that you should treat the company's money as your own money, but until you really make it their money, it's very difficult to do that.
It's a cliche, hollow cliche, yeah.
So what happens with us is that at the end of the year, you will have $24,000 for business-related type expenses. You buy your PC out of that, your paper, you know, that type of stuff. And at the end of the year, if you have money left over, then it gets redistributed through payroll, and it actually does become your money. And so what happens on a day-to-day basis is that people actually do spend the company's money for these types of things like it is their own money, because it really is their own money.
Wow, that's amazing. You were joking, you know, I don't know if John Thane would have bought a $1,400 trash can if it had come out of his $6,000. So
it's a big part of it. It's a big part of it is socializing costs and personalizing benefits, and that's really linked to hierarchy as well. And if you're able to get a personal benefit and not have the company pay for it, then you're going to be much less productive and much less efficient than if you are actually feeling the pleasure and the pain associated with that cost.
Right. In the meantime, personally, you're buying the pieces you want and that make you more productive, because you're a Mac guy, I'm a paper guy,
total
or whatever.
Flexibility.
Right. So let's turn now a little bit to the customer, a huge area of focus for Peter Drucker. What's different about the way Brand Velocity handles customer relations than, say, the way you did things at Coke?
Well, of course, Coke does a great job at customers, and they have lots of customers. I think what's different is when you look at it through a knowledge work productivity lens, is really connecting the dots. And it's very easy to lose focus, on customers, because you're spending so much time focused on getting your fair share of the infrastructure and all of that, you know, as you fight things out with the traditional model. But it's also, companies tend to get very disintegrated by specializing and having so many chiefs, you know, doing so many different things. And what suffers a lot of times is a uniform focus on the customer. And so from our standpoint, we really focus on the customer in a very integrated way. And we link as the pillars that I talked about before, we link our intellectual property, we link sales, relationship management, delivery, HR, and business systems around the customer as if they are a single thing. And we connect the dots also from proposal to delivery to follow-up in a way where the customer is judging us all the way, and we're incorporating this feedback at every step in terms of making things better and better. And the debriefs that we have with customers and at the end of engagements means that with every engagement we get better, and as a company we get more mature, and I think we have a much more unified focus in terms of why they're so important. And as a startup, you really realize how important, you know, every customer is. But that focus through a productivity lens, I think, is an important one from a customer standpoint.
Is it a matter of just communicating among the folks within Brand Velocity to break down these silos, or is it really about a whole new structure?
It's a very repetitive structure. I think what you find out when you're putting together a traditionally virtual environment is that structure is more important than ever. And when you don't have people in the same place at the same time doing work, having a structure, not only a mental structure in terms of how work gets done, but also a structure in terms of how the functions work, how they work together so that you don't have duplication, that you don't have gaps, is really an important part of the process. Now, parenthetically, it's very important for large companies too, but sometimes you get diluted that you're doing a lot of things that you really aren't doing in practice.
Your internal culture, I know, is important. Again, it's a small team, 10 people. You write, though, in Reinvent Your Enterprise, the most unusual value at Brand Velocity, according to people we interact with, is our emphasis on being nice. However, with knowledge work, if people aren't nice, friendly, collegial, whatever you wish to call it, their relationships and therefore their work won't be productive. Why is being nice so important to knowledge work, and how do you foster a culture of niceness? Yes.
Well, I think knowledge work is a very human thing. And what's different about knowledge work from manual work is its dependence on synergy between people to get either something new created, something that's successful improved, or something that's unsuccessful stopped. And it's never a one-person show. And so our values, not only nice, we're a bunch of swans. We're smart, we work hard, we're ambitious, we're nice. So we have swans all over the place. But the nice part, which is the most unusual, is really in many ways what makes it work. Because that's part of removing the dysfunctions of a traditional environment. In a very specialized environment where functions are kings, and they're looking at the company through their respective lenses, what happens is there's not a premium on being nice. There's a premium on being smart. And if you're rubbing everybody the wrong way, but you're right, that's good enough. The fact is that they're very, very ineffective professionals, except within their own function. But knowledge work productivity is an enterprise game. And it's important to look at it across in terms of how can we envision where we're going to go and why, design what we're going to do and when, build how we can best do those things, and then operate in terms of who's responsible for what, who's responsible for which task, which is such an important part of human achievement. And being nice is really a common denominator for achieving better results.
Another thing you write in the book is that your organization's ability to rapidly convert learning into action will be its most sustainable competitive weapon in the knowledge age. So what does Brand Velocity do to convert learning into action? Can you give me a specific example or two?
Sure. A really important component of knowledge work and knowledge is that it has a half-life and a short half-life. The knowledge that's really important right at this instant will not be nearly as important maybe even tomorrow, but certainly not a year from now. And so one example of something that we institutionalize in terms of applying knowledge to work and to doing it more productively is the use of mastermind meetings. Now, a mastermind meeting, again, people can be wherever they are around the world and converge around a subject to get the best knowledge that we have on a subject in an immediate way. If you compare it to a big corporate environment the way you would do it is you would schedule a meeting. It's usually 2 weeks to get everybody's calendar together. If it's really important, you might as well have an off-site. That'll take 3 days. Might as well bring in a consultant in order to have some team building. And by the time that it all gets done, people have wandered around in terms of the deliverable. So a lot of times, what they meant to have the meeting for isn't even important by them. What's really important is time. And what's important is to apply the best knowledge that you have in the shortest period of time. And we took a lot of principles from Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich and all these. But when he studied the great magnates, of the early 1900s, mastermind meetings was really a key to their success. Bringing in people who were smarter than they were on different subjects, bring them together to solve a problem. Now, there are less cigars now and stuff like that when we do it, but really converging in a mastermind meeting with a problem, a decision maker, an overview of the minimum knowledge that people have to solve the problem, and then a resolution. All happens always within an hour, usually within 30 minutes, and we deal with things that are as complicated, if not more so, than anything that I dealt with in a big corporation.
Wow, and do you bring in people outside the organization for that as masterminds?
It's a combination, but mostly it's people within our own organization, which, as you know, our organization is very rich in
brain power.
In experience.
Yes.
That's a key part of us.
So I'm going to turn it over to the audience in a minute, but I have one last question, which is related to some of the things you said, especially as you've compared brand velocity to a big corporation where we do see a lot of dysfunction. So your results are impressive. You have a cost structure that's 20% lower than the consulting industry you're in. Your clients are said to rate your work highly when you compete head-to-head with some of the biggest technology consulting firms in the world. But this goes back to this earlier goal you had, which is how scalable is all this? I mean, can you keep doing these things with 20 people or 100 people or 500 or 5,000 people or more?
I think that with minor modifications at different thresholds of size, it is more scalable than the traditional model. And the reason that I say that is because we are not constrained by geography. We're not constrained by fixed assets. And we are not constrained from a balance sheet standpoint in that this model does not require operating capital to grow. And when you combine those things in terms of the things that keep other companies from growing, I think to a large degree they've been designed out. But largely because we took a big company view first and then said, how can we do all the stuff that the big company can do, but try to eliminate the baggage based on the old management.
Right. And you very consciously brought in folks, right, not from boutique consulting firms, but from, right, they're almost all big company experienced people, right, to sort of have this scalability idea in mind as you implement all these things? Is that right? Where some of your partners and others come from? What have they done?
We have Bill Hartman, who's actually here today, but we have Bill Hartman, who is the CEO of Ernst & Young Global Accounts. We have Bill Casey, who ran a third of the Coca-Cola Company, 17 time zones around the world. Terry Asink, who was Chief Information Officer for Kimberly-Clark. Alan Kissling, who was Chief Technology Officer for the Coca-Cola Company. And it's really people who have had to deal with big things. And so we've really been able to design that type of knowledge into this prototype so that it's scalable over time.
And when do you go from prototype to when will brand velocity have 20 and 100 and 500 and so on?
Well, I think this is a really important year for us, and I think it's the convergence of Reinvent Your Enterprise,
the book, right.
the book, the strategic profiling knowledge work productivity instrument for large enterprise projects, and then what we've learned in terms of a corporate capability, all converging this year. So this is a big year for us.
And the strategic profiling is a tool you've built to help, right, others sort of get some of these concepts down, yes?
It is. They all relate to the same knowledge work productivity framework, and they are operational tools to help people apply it in the real world.
That's great. That's great. Let me turn it over now to the audience, and